Hi everyone, and welcome to Game Prop Modeling Fundamentals. In this course, we're going to learn how to work within an existing style to create a functional prop for an existing game world. And let's just get started. So the first thing we want to do when starting to work with a game asset prop is to figure out what it is that we're actually trying to create in the first place. So we're actually trying to create the chest that exists in this scene. And we want to basically look over the concept art that's been created for us in advance. If you don't have concept art created, my suggestion would be for whatever you're working on, make sure you do have established some drawings of what you want first. It's best to have an establishing idea of what you're really trying to create. So anytime I'm trying to create a prop, I'll always look through all the pieces of reference that exist. These are the ones that are already provided. And so this will help give us a sense of what the world is going to look like when we're trying to create our prop, what the smaller details may look like, all of the elements around it that surround it. Because sometimes when we get a concept, it may not necessarily have all the information that we need, and we'll need to adapt based on whatever we're seeing in these other pieces of concept art. So I'll end up looking at certain kind of shapes that exist to make sure that all of these look appropriate in some way. And anything I create kind of has those same angles, those kind of sharp lines, a little bit of like maybe gold built into those things. But for example, in some cases, we may already have a concept built for us. So in this case, this is a concept I'm working off of, which is just a basic version of this chest. Something relatively simple, nothing too complicated, but has embellishments of those same design features that exist within the rest of the scene. So it's important that I obviously work off of this, but it's also worth making sure that you look at existing other art. So this art is from the Game Environment Modeling Fundamentals course by Alex DeGerman on Pluralsight as well. And in his course, he also covers how to create the rest of this scene. Now, because this is already established, it's important for me to make sure that I'm working off of the same kind of style that he's working with. That way, my prop fits into the scene. If I don't acknowledge the rest of this scene and create a prop that is just made because of like my own aesthetic decisions or choices, then I'm not necessarily going to end up with something that works well in the scene. And if the prop doesn't work well in the scene, then it's not going to work at all. So you want to make sure those things go together and are built to go together. So obviously you want to look at the details that exist here and kind of replicate some of those same kinds of choices, but on a different scale. And now that we've looked over these concepts, we might as well jump into Max and get modeling. Okay, so now that we're in Max, we basically just want to set up our concept in this scene so that we've got something that's going to work well for us. So the first thing that I want to do is just create a plane that will hold our concept. Now usually I actually just generally show a concept on another monitor, but for the purposes of this video, we can easily just view this inside the viewport. So basically, let's just grab our environmental concept, and the nice thing with Max is you can kind of just drag your image right onto the plane itself, and it'll just update. Now you can eyeball the scale of this if you want, or if you want to get very particular with the sizing, you can simply just come down here into UVW map on our modifiers, scroll on down to bitmap fit, and then you just need to find the concept. So in this case, it's the PSD, which is fine. And now we'll get the perfect proportions, which is exactly what we want. And you can adjust the size of our image here just to match that by changing our length and width on our plane itself. And now this is to scale, which is exactly what we want. So we can just kind of put this over here. Let me push it back a little bit. In fact, I'm going to press M as well to bring up my material editor. I'm going to pick this as well. And I'm just going to crank up the self-illumination on it. The reason that I'm doing that is just to make sure that this is going to show up at any angle and not get kind of dim or not as brightly lit as it should be. And that's basically all I need to do. So now I can actually just start modeling this out as I see fit. This kind of perspective angle is not something where I'm going to be creating really specific block-ins off of the exact shape of this. This is just to give a general guideline. When it comes to props, you usually don't get, in production anyways, you usually don't get like really detailed orthograph drawings. You usually get something like this. So you want to make sure that you're able to build off of that and to guesstimate certain sizes and proportions. So easily, let's just start blocking things in, looking at general proportions, and taking a bit of a stab at what those sizes should be. So that works pretty well. Let's just shift drag this up so that we've got that section for the top. I'm going to right click and do the editable poly on this so that I can start to just edit the shape of it. Bring this down a little bit here. Just trying to eyeball some of those proportions. If it helps, you can kind of just push this down so that you can see that at a bit of a better angle. But this will just kind of help give you an idea of the various parts that you're working with. I'm just going to attach this together as well, just so these two are all one object. So I want that top section to be separated. And again, I can kind of just eyeball here and make sure that these sizes are the same as well. So that's pretty good. Now I'll just block in the next section here. I do want a perfect square to become our little diamond shape. So I'm just holding control as I drag this out. Lift this up a little bit. And I'm going to use my angle snaps. I can access that by pressing A as well, which will lock this to 5-degree angles. So I want about a 45-degree rotation and then a 90-degree rotation here. So this works pretty well. I do want to set this up right in the center of it, so I'm going to align. Just to show again, the align button is right here. And basically I just have whatever I'm selected, click on the object that I want, and I can say to the center of this entire object, but I could also turn off certain positions, such as the Y position, because I like the X, which would center this entirely, and I like the Z in both these cases, just to kind of make sure that this goes centered, but Y position I can kind of dictate for myself. So let's just drop that there, push this in to a certain point here. Now I do want to raise this up a little bit and scale it down as well, because it's going to be important to make sure that the proportions of this fit this object as well. So let's come back here, go into our edit mode, and start to adjust our scale. Because getting the proportions right at this stage is very, very important for what we're trying to do. Because if I don't quite get those right, it's going to be tricky to work with. Things aren't going to look the way that they should, and it's just not going to give the right impression. So you can see here, for example, like this shape is too big in comparison with my concept. I may even just duplicate this as well. Let's just call it an instance and kind of just rotate it into this position, just so I've got something off to the side, maybe even a little bit bigger as well, just to always have a visual of what I should be creating off to the side. It's really, really useful to have just kind of kicking around so that you always know what your proportions should probably be. Now, a lot of times when doing a prop like this, you are eyeballing things. You're taking a guess, you're taking a bit of a stab in the dark just to make sure that these shapes look the way that they're supposed to, and you may not get like really detailed concepts for this stuff, and that's pretty common. So you want to make sure that you're always kind of working with something that's going to look reasonably appropriate, and making sure that you're doing comparisons on, regardless of what the concept's doing, making sure that this still looks good over here as well. Such as, for example, should this angle match this angle on the chest? If it starts to go really, really, really far like that, it may just be too much, and I may want to just pull that back a little bit more and have those just straight up not match up. And that's perfectly fine, but you got to make those decisions while you're working with this object itself. So that works pretty decent. I do feel like the proportion here is not quite right, so again, you just kind of got to keep monitoring that and making sure that these two things work well together. Potentially switching between the objects, or in this case, we could attach this right in here and start maneuvering things around like this as well. Getting the proportion for that stuff is right. If it takes time, it's fine, because this is one of the most important stages of what you're trying to work on. And so what I did there as well, just to show you, is I had this selected and I just control-clicked on vertices so that I would convert that polygon selection into vertices, and then I'm just going to select this section here right through the model. Alt-X will end up letting me see through the model that I have selected. And I can just kind of pull this down a little bit more just to make sure that that proportion looks a little bit better. So that's pretty decent. I may pull the sides of the... let's get that selected again there. I may pull the sides of these out just a little bit. I'm just going to do one side for now. That seems fine. And I will toss down a symmetry modifier onto this object just so I can get it working a little bit better. Now in this case, it's not going exactly where I want, so again, I can actually just click on the symmetry again to adjust the modifier itself, and I can use my snaps to just kind of push this in. If you've not used snaps before, it's our little snaps toggle up here. Now by default, it's only going to be using grid points. That's not necessarily useful for us in most cases. We do want to use vertices in this case. So just make sure you turn on vertices, and you go over to options as well and make sure you turn on enable axis constraints. I'm using Max 2017 at the moment, and in that case, enable axis constraints is turned off. So just make sure you turn that on. And we're just going to snap that over here on only the x-axis. So just make sure you click that axis and drag it over to the central point. And then any kind of modifications we make on this will just go and appear on the other side. Now I'm pressing spacebar to do that because I've set up a shortcut key to show the end result of my model, which is what we're going to start looking at in our next video, as well as how to start defining the rest of this a little bit more than we currently have.